Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another week. Let's start another week fresh. We're looking to start off with like a solving quadratic equations quiz. Um, and that essentially means 4-5, 4-7, and 4-8. Remember all three of those lessons, all three of those sections pretty much all revolved around solving quadratic equations. Even 4-8, where we learned about imaginary numbers, is a pretty big section for you guys as like math students. But even 4-8 really at the end of the day boiled down to solving quadratic equations. So, get out of there. So I want you to take some notes here and then turn in the notes before you take the quiz. You don't need to write this down. This is just like kind of a quick uh, strategy or the steps. You're going to set equal to 0 first, unless you notice that it's something like x squared minus 6 or something equals 0. There are certain examples where you actually can just end up getting x by itself by eventually taking the square root of both sides. It's not exactly the majority of the time, but there are moments where you don't really have to set equal to 0. But you'll see that as we go on. But the normal, like the usual routine most of the time will probably look like this. You're going to make sure it's set equal to 0. You're going to factor that other side, if possible. And then if you are able to factor, you're going to set the factors equal to 0, and then you're going to solve those equations separately. Yeah? And then just remember, you can always use the quadratic formula. Most of the time people just use it if the factoring didn't work out, but you can use the quadratic formula every single time. Even for examples like that, you can use the quadratic formula. And that's when you see your original problem as this, like this would be your original problem to solve, and it's got to be in standard form, set equal to 0. And then you can take your A value, B value, and C value and plug it into here to get your answers. Usually there's two real answers. But anyway, whatever. Let's do like 7 quick examples, okay? 4-5 through 4-8 review. So write that down. X squared minus 5x equals 0. Write it. And we're going to look to set it equal to 0. Already done. Then we factor. You know what, people? A lot of students forget that when you look at x squared minus 5x, that factors, but it factors by GCF. GCF. It doesn't unfoil. It factors by GCF. And then when you set both factors equal to 0, x equals 0, the GCF, or x minus 5 equals 0. So the GCF factor and the bubble factor. And then this one's already solved basically. And then the solution you get from here, once you get x by itself, okay, x equals 0 or x equals 5. That one's done. Or you could have done the quadratic formula. Looked like A equals 1, B equals -5, and there really is no C term, so C would equal 0. Over here in number 2, write that down. X squared plus 4x equals -2. The first thing you would do is you would have to set it equal to 0 by adding 32 to both sides. And now we look to factor. Well, there's no GCF, and so when I look at this, well, people, hate to say this, but I think I made a little mistake. So no worries. Let's just kind of regroup here. I meant this to be a positive 32 over here, and the bottom line is I meant this to be a minus 32 once you set it equal to 0. Sorry about that. So let's kind of regroup here. The original equation was supposed to just be 32, positive 32. And then when you move that over to the other side to set equal to 0, that would have been x squared plus 4x minus 32 equals 0. And the reason I needed it equal, minus 32 is that way it can actually unfoil. So what two numbers multiply to get negative 32, but they also add up to positive 4? Well, that would be positive 8 and negative 4. And now once we've factored, we can set both factors equal to 0 and end up with negative 8 with x by itself, or positive 4. And that one's done. Or you could have done the quadratic formula with a equals 1, b equals positive 4, and c equals negative 32. This next one, number 3, once again, it's already equal to 0, so we try to factor, and there's no GCF, so we move on to unfoil. Now, if this has any chance of unfoiling, I say, my method would be the Phoenix method. So let's see if that works out. The first thing we would have to do is multiply that Phoenix 3 to the other end. All right. Now, let's see. Can we keep this going? Are there two numbers that multiply to get negative 45, but they combine, they add, to be negative 4? Yep. And if you have to do some scratch work over here about all the different ways to get negative 45, then that's what you gotta do. So, hey, Phoenix method's working out pretty good, but don't forget to bring the Phoenix back to life. Don't forget to have the Phoenix rise from the ashes. Like that. And then we reduce the fractions if we can. And anything left over, nothing to do there. Now we bump the 3 up in front of the x, just like that. And geez, so now we factored all that. See, all that just to factor, right? Just to factor. But don't forget, we're not just factoring here. We're factoring so that we can solve this actual equation. So now what we do is we set both factors equal to 0. The answer we get from over here when we get x by itself is positive 3, because, I know I haven't been writing out this kind of stuff, but we add 3 to both sides. Over here we would subtract 5 to the other side, and then we would have to divide both sides by 3. So my other answer would be negative 5/3. So there's my two answers. Now remember, your other option was to do the quadratic formula, which, you know what? I know you're going to hate me a little bit for extending the video, but let's do that one time, okay? Even though we already have the answers to number 3, Let's write this out, okay? I want to show you what happens. I mean, there is a method to my madness here, okay? There's a reason for everything. So, remember the quadratic formula, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Alright, so my a value, so you can only figure out the a, b, and c when it's equal to 0. So a is 3, b is -4. So remember, people, you got to be really careful with your negatives. I know I've said this before, it's the easiest place to make a mistake when you have like a negative b value and or you have a negative c value. That's where people screw up with, like, they can't keep track of negatives. You know what I mean? Our b value is -4 and our c value is -15. Wow. The trifecta. We have a negative b value and a negative c value. So let's be very careful here. -4 plus or minus, and then we're squaring a -4 minus 4 times 3 times -15. This is insane, man. I know. Hey, it's insane. All over 2 times 3. Whoa! Now, but hey, just keep track of your stuff. You know what I mean? So -4, that's going to be a +4. Now, stay with me here. You ready? -4 squared is +16. You know? And then over here, it's going to be like, well, I might as well write it out. You know what I mean? +16. And then here it's a -4 times 3 times a -15. So again, this is where people mess up with the negatives. But your answer here is going to be +180. +180. And then over 6. Now, 4 plus or minus the square root of 196 all over 6. All right? I'll try to fast track this, at the end here, but guess what? At this point, you'd have to look at the square root and think about what you could do with it. What can you do with the square root of 196? Right? That's actually clean. Like, that's actually just 14. Okay? So now what you would have to do is take this all the way to the end. Right? You would actually do this and simplify it all the way USA. And for your first answer, you would do 4 plus 14, which is 20. Idiot. What am I saying? Let me say that again. 4 plus 14 is 18. So we got 18 divided by 6. Well, wouldn't you know? That's the 3 over here. And then if we pick the minus, it's going to be 4 minus 14, which is -10 all over 6, which would, there's the -5/3. So that's what happens there, okay? Number 4. So write that down. X squared minus 9 equals 0. Now, you could do the quadratic formula. You could look at this and go, hey, isn't this the kind where you could, like, get x squared alone and then take the square root of both sides? Heck yeah. And you would just have to remember that you have a plus or minus answer. You know what I mean? Or you could look at this and realize that you absolutely can factor, because it's special case unfoil. It's the difference of two perfect squares. So you could absolutely unfoil this and factor, basically, and then set both of these factors equal to 0 and end up with positive 3 as one of your answers and negative 3 as your other answer. There's all kinds of ways to do number 4. There's literally 3 different ways to do it. This way, the factoring way, or just doing the quadratic formula where a would equal 1, b would actually equal 0 because remember it's bx, like there, so, and then c would equal negative 9. But I'm not gonna, again, this video is gonna be long enough without me going down every single path. Number 5, speaking of different paths, remember you could absolutely do the quadratic formula here. A would equal 1, b would equal 0, and c would equal what? Negative 14. It's already equal to 0. Can you but I'm not going to do this, right? Dot, dot, yada, yada. I'm not going to do it. Could you factor this? No. It's not like it's x squared minus 9. 14. But here's what you can do. You actually can move this term over there and end up taking the square root of both sides to just get x by itself. Now, what's the square root of 14? That's not nice. Otherwise we would have factored. But can you simplify the square root of 14? No. So guess what your answer is? Plus or minus just the square root of 14. There's nothing you can do. If you can do the square root, you do it. If you can simplify the square root, you do it. But hey, nothing real new there. Couple more. Bear with me, please, here, gang. Number 6, write that down. X squared plus 2x equals 2. Well, what's the first thing we got to do? We have to make sure that first it's equal to 0. Next, we try to factor. And spoiler alert, there's no GCF that's going to work, and you would not be able to unfoil. So guess what we have to do? We literally have no other choice than the quadratic formula. So a equals 1, love it. B equals positive 2. C equals negative 2. So negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac. Oh, it's a negative c value. Tread carefully. All over 2a. What was a? It was 1. All right. Come on. 2 squared is 4. Now, we have this minus. Minus 4 times 1 times negative 2 ends up being plus 8 all over 2. So we end up with negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 12 all over 2. Now, I mean, we're pretty much done, right? But at this point, you have to be in the habit of doing this, of looking at the square root and saying to yourself, can we do that square root? Can we at least simplify it? So we can't do the whole square root of 12, but it does simplify to 2 root 3. Okay? And considering the situation we're all in, right, I'm going to be okay with you stopping right there. But I just want you to know that you actually could take this whole fractions stuff and you actually could do a little bit more simplifying. But again, I'm not trying to completely overwhelm you, right? Number 7, once again, hey, it's already equal to 0. Cool. Can you factor this? Spoiler alert, you cannot factor by GCF, and you also cannot factor by unfoil. So guess what we have to do? A equals 1, B equals -3, and C equals +4. So here we go. The opposite of B. See that? -3. Plus or minus square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C. Geez, I am squeezing that together. All over 2A. Holy smokes, man. Alright, -3. That's +3. And then here, a negative, again, you got to keep track of your negatives, people. I'm a broken record about it, sorry. But -3 squared is +9. And then -4 times 1 times 4, that's -16. All over 2. And so the square root becomes -7. Ew. The square root of -7. So we look at the square root of -7. Can we do anything with that? I mean, can we do the square root of -7? No. But what you have to realize is that the square root of -7 is imaginary. So what you're going to have to do as a bare minimum here is break off the square root of -1, which is I. And then we have the square root of 7, which cannot be further simplified or anything. So guess what? This would be your final answer there. So that's basically this example right here is section 4.8 creeping its way into this review, okay? So you got to be ready for so on this quiz, you got to be ready for quadratic formula that results in imaginary answers. You got to be ready for a quadratic formula problem where you pretty much have to do the quadratic formula. You know what I mean? You got to be ready for, at least one of these, where it's either like the difference of, so you got to be ready for this situation. And you probably have to be ready for a situation where the Phoenix method could apply. So you got to be aware of the Phoenix method. And you got to be aware of an equation where you could factor by GCF. And maybe another one with easy unfoil factoring. But again, you can literally do the quadratic formula on all 7 of these problems. All right, let me know if you have any questions, but good luck on the quiz.